time passes, but I think keeping their memory alive, like that's their only way to, so they don't die in vain, right? And in today's crazy world we're living in, I think talking about like what the fire department did, like we said before, after September 11th, is a great story, and I think it should be heard because these guys did it. Like it's just a simple truth. That's kind of how I look at this, what we're talking about, and whether it's our family's truth or the fire department's truth. Like I just think as 9/11 kind of keeps going in the rearview mirror, as time keeps moving on, I think it's important to kind of remember 9/11 is almost like a phrase, right? Like it was their September 11th, or it was, that's their ground zero. Like it's almost more of a catchphrase than it is an incident. So I just like to try to bring awareness to like the decisions that were made that day and how it affected everyone afterwards. And yeah, so it's been an incredible experience. Get to meet some really amazing people and kind of share with them, my father's story and our family. So it's been a blessing.
Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. We just broke episode 80, which is just an incredible accomplishment to date. It's crazy to think that we got here, and I couldn't have done it without all of you guys, the listeners. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but if it wasn't for you and your following, we wouldn't be here. So please go ahead, hit subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're getting your podcast from. Also, I want to thank you. We had a really big week with book sales. There is a discount code in the show notes if you want to pick up a copy of Break Barriers or Audacious. Go check it out. Great time headed into summer. If you're looking for a summer reading, check out Audacious or Break Barriers. Really excited for today's guest for multiple reasons. One of the reasons being the fact that his story really hits home for our generation, millennials in particular, millennials who grew up in New York, and we're going to dive into it. My guest is James Dowdell. His journey is deeply rooted in a legacy of service and sacrifice, influenced profoundly by the loss of his father, a New York City fireman who perished on 9/11. This pivotal event in his life didn't just guide his decision to embrace public service, it solidified his resolve to stay the course in honoring his memories and the values he embodied. In James's keynote speeches, he explores the themes of resilience, courage, and the indispensable role of community support in facing and overcoming life's most challenging obstacles. James's mission is to inspire and motivate audiences across the globe, encouraging them to stay the course amidst adversity and to recognize the transformative power of unity in facilitating healing and growth. James, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Of course, man. Look, I got just some background on your story before you and I ever connected, and this was a no-brainer for multiple reasons. This is a story that I feel like a good chunk of our audience can just, very heavily soak in, and just kind of will bring them back to where they were back on 9/11, and to kind of just remind them that these heroes should never be forgotten, but that their legacies are most certainly not in vain. And I'm thrilled for the opportunity, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to dive in. So, your bio kind of outlines one of the key themes that we're going to be digging into. Why don't we just build a little bit of background for the audience here? Tell us a little bit more about your upbringing and where you grew up.
Yeah, I grew up down in Rockaway Beach, Queens, and it's a great neighborhood. My father moved here when he was a child. He moved to the Rockaways. Actually, his family moved to Colorado, and my father didn't want to go, so he ended up staying back, and he stayed in St. John's Boys Home in Rockaway Beach. And he fell in love with the ocean and the community. And he stayed at the boys' home until he was 18, and then he moved in with his brother. But when he met my mother and were looking for a place to settle, this was the perfect spot for them to raise their family. So we've been here ever since, and it's a phenomenal place.
And for context, how old are you, James?
So I'm 39 now. My birthday is September 10th. Um, in '01, I had turned 17, September 10th, 2001. So yeah,
Wow.
the big
Take
4-0
us
this year.
big 4-0 this year. But I'm sure that your birthday has changed, tremendously over the last 23 years now. And it's crazy to say that. Um, why don't we go there? I mean, usually I'd kind of dive a little bit deeper into, your family life, but let's just go there. Take us back to September 10th, 2001.
Regular Monday, September 10th. Went to school. We had my brother. I have a brother who's 16 months older than me, and he was a freshman at Iona College in '01. So he went to so the weekend before, that I guess the 8th, ninth. We got together as a family. We did a ton of family stuff. Had the birthday party. Just a really good experience. Looking back, you never realize, right? You just say, "All right, Pat, I'll see you later." My father drove my brother back to college, and we didn't realize that that was the last time like our family of four would be together. Um, so yeah, September 10th always, it's like a bittersweet day. Obviously, this the next day, September 11th, changed like everyone's life forever. Uh, it's kind of, if I look back at it, September 10th, like my world was at peace, our world was at peace, right? Everything was good, and then the next day, like the world kind of turned upside down. I was a senior in high school at Xavier in Lower Manhattan, on 16th Street in Manhattan. So yeah, it got real fast, I guess you could say, at just being in the city, being kind of young, not realizing what's going on, and yeah, just being able to just being in the city, I guess, and kind of experiencing like what was going on was definitely surreal. I think one of the we didn't have social media, right? We didn't have uh, phones or any of that stuff, so information was slow to kind of come in. Right, we were still waiting for the teachers to let us know what was going on, which it's very different from the society we're in today, right? Where everyone gets instant access, instant news. So we were back then. It was kind of slow to come in, and as news started trickling in, you started going like it was just it was crazy.
Wow. Where was your father stationed?
He was the lieutenant in Rescue Company 4, which is out in Queens. So there's 5 rescue companies in the city for the FDNY, and one in each borough. So he was the lieutenant working assigned to the rescue company in Queens.
Before September 11th, how much pride did you have in your father being a firefighter?
Well, I mean, immense pride. Just it's what we knew growing up. My father, all his friends were firemen. When my father built our house, everyone who was working on it was firemen. There's a great sense of community within the fire department. When I My father kind of when he was in his like coming out of the boys' home, moving up in life, his family was in Colorado. So when he got on the fire department, he was in his early 20s, and he got on there and kind of really embraced the culture, like really working with the brotherhood, like really enjoying everyone's company, making friends. Like that, it was a very good place for him to be, and I think that's why he excelled in it. The environment was great. It was exciting. It's a life of service. You're going to fires, so life. That's how we grew up. We grew up like that, loving to going to work, loving coming home. Uh, all of my friends' fathers were firemen. It was definitely a great way to grow up.
It's so special hearing it from you directly because a lot of people didn't really have insight into the lives of firefighters, police officers, rescue workers until 9/11, and then it was just kind of hearing directly from the families who were impacted, similar to you around the fact that, their worst nightmare essentially unfolded. And it was different for them because a lot of them, they willingly walked into, what was happening, as opposed to, and not to say that one is better than the other, but as opposed to someone who was just at work regularly. These are people who decided to literally walk into the fire. Um, do you have any insight into how things went down that morning on 9/11?
Um, so let me start off by saying, there's 343 New York City firemen that were killed on that day, right? So there's 343 families with incredible stories of their loved one. Those are all fathers, sons, uncles, friends. So there's 343 incredible stories out there, and they all should be heard. If you I would implore anyone who is, if you would just, you can go on the New York Times website from back in 2001, and really you could read almost one a day, right? And learn something about what some of these men did and where they came from. Uh, that morning for my father out in Queens, they were, the event obviously was so significant. They sent all five rescues on the initial plane attack. From my understanding, they all went there. By the time my father got from Queens to Lower Manhattan, ended up parking over by Pace University, and then from there walking to the command post on the west side of Manhattan. You know, we were told they kind of had to hug the building line. There was debris, there was bodies, there was obviously mass chaos down there. Um, he was seen checking in at the command post, and his orders with his company were to go start making their way up in the South Tower. The South Tower was the second plane to hit. Was the South Tower was the first one to collapse. So they were sent over there to the South Tower to make their way up and just start giving reports and try to start helping.
Do you know, in his group, um, were a lot of other firefighters lost in his group in particular?
Yeah, so everyone working in Rescue 4 was killed. There ended up in the company they lost nine guys. One of the and the reason why a lot of companies lost a lot of guys was because it happened at the change of tours, which means um, the group coming off the night tour and the group coming in on the day tour. So it starts at 9 o'clock. So you get there an hour early. Everyone gets there around 8 o'clock in the morning or before, and then the day tour starts riding at 9. So it came in at 8:45, 8:46, I think. So you had a bunch of guys. You had almost sometimes two full groups of guys. One group getting off, one group coming on. They saw the magnitude of it, and they all jumped on. So that's why certain places had lost. Rescues ride with six guys. Some rescues lost 10, 11, 12 because extra guys jumped on.
I've just I hear it in your voice, and I think about it, and it brings me back. Uh, and you were just regular day at school for you?
Yeah, first period. Kind of went into senior year really excited. I just watched my brother go into. He just finished his senior year. Pat was a year ahead of me at Xavier. A lot of great perks as a senior, right? There's a lot to look forward to. The proms, the graduation parties, moving on in life, going to college. So it was definitely a positive. Really just excited about all the things coming up in that year. It's finally like my older brother was out of the school. I was a senior. You get your driver's license, the freedoms, right? We started hanging out in the city a little more. We're going, just going up to Union Square. Like when you were a senior at Xavier back then, you were allowed to leave for lunch just to kind of get to go hang out and stuff. Yeah, just looking forward to all those perks of being a senior. And that in the same regard, like my parents were looking, they were going to be empty nesters. They'd been married for over 20 years, and they were kind of looking, they had one son in college. The second son was getting ready to go to college. So I'd say in my life and our family's life, we were all in like a really good spot. We were all looking forward to the future, and yeah, it just it one of those lessons like life can change in an instant.
While you're at school, does it cross your mind, did they like roll in the TV? Because I remember they did that for us in school.
So they didn't roll on the TV. There was an announcement over the loudspeaker saying that if anyone has family that work at the World Trade Center, to come to the library. I didn't have to go to the library. My father did not work near the Trade Center, right? So I wasn't thinking. I didn't realize the scope. So they went and then they started saying you got to get signed out, right? They couldn't just let a bunch of high school kids leave the city. So we were looking for. I finally got a hold of my mother, who was a public school teacher, and she was. She said that she can. She couldn't come get me. She was in a lockdown too, right? So she had third grade in Brooklyn. So we ended up having to. I was like, yeah, I got a hold of my mother finally. She was like, I'll call dad. She called the firehouse. They're not there. Uh, we'll come up with a plan. Sit tight for a little bit. So that's what I did. I hung out at school for a little longer, kind of waited, and then all the my mom finally got a hold of a family friend who ended up just coming to sign me out, and we actually couldn't. I couldn't even get home that night. I ended up in Staten Island because the only way out of the city that day was kind of by boat
Yeah, the ferry.
or walking. So we jumped on. Yeah, we jumped on. I guess it was like it might have been like a waterway at that point. Like just people were just all those boats were just like kind of taking everyone on and bringing you. So we ended up in Staten Island that night, and when I called my mom that night, just asked like, "Hey, did you talk to dad?" And she was like, I still haven't heard from him. But you're watching now. You're watching on the news. You're watching the TV. You're like, all right, well, it's definitely crazy. You're kind of still holding on, saying, all right, it's definitely bad. But in my head, my father had been through a million fires. He was decorated fireman, always worked in busy companies. I was like, if anyone can handle it, it's him. So it was. I would say that was one of the things about September 11th in particular was like waiting. There was no like moment where you were like, all right, he's gone. It was you kind of held on to hope, and that hope just over time faded. Once he was put on the missing list, like a week or two later, even that you kind of knew in your head it wasn't good, but you still kind of held on to hope, thinking, every time the door opened, we would all be looking at it, thinking my father was just going to finally come through. There was talks of voids that guys could be, alive in. There was talks of, firemen in hospitals all across the city and in Jersey. All those turned out to be rumors, but that gave us a little bit of hope at the moment. And I guess you hold on to hope when you need it.
Just so we can bring the audience back to that day and getting out of school. Talk to me about um you walk out of like I this is not the same, but I do remember like the apocalyptic feel um during Hurricane Sandy, right? Like the city was completely like blacked out. Half the city was completely blacked out. People were walking around like zombies in the street. I
Yeah.
imagine this was a million times worse. Can you tell us and kind of paint a picture for us around what it was like, the emotion, how people were looking at each other, the blank stares, even getting on the boat. Can you see the smoke from the towers at that point? And are people, embracing each other, or are people just really quiet?
So the walk from Xavier to the ferry, we ended up going down the east side and walking, like taking the FDR down and around, right, to where the Staten Island ferries. And it was chaotic. It was definitely chaotic. People, a lot of people running, crying, just all, yeah, I guess like the best word, it was just chaos, right? There was cars were stopped, buses were stopped, there was no traffic moving, and there was just thousands of people trying to flee. By the time we got out of school, it's probably closer to like the 1:30 in the afternoon range. The towers were down at this point. There was a huge plume of dust in Lower Manhattan. You could only see like smoke and dust from the ferry. I remember looking back, and the whole, it, like you said, kind of apocalyptic. Just the Lower Manhattan was covered in smoke and dust. And yeah, once we got on the ferry, you kind of realized maybe the scope of what was going on. You saw people bloody, full of dust, sitting on the ferry, crying, trying to lines for the payphone to try to reach out to loved ones. Remember people trying to share cell phones, but those weren't really working that well. Um, so yeah, it was definitely a chaotic, and but it's funny, right? In those worst moments, the line of people to help each other was is
Yeah, humanity shines the
yeah,
brighter.
like it's amazing that in the worst of times brings out the best in people. Like I really believe that. And again, you saw it after Sandy too.
Yeah.
But you just, yeah, so as much as crazy as it was, people were stopping, people were helping each other, people were, the older women that needed getting on the ferry. I remember a guy stopping everybody and helping this woman on. So just yeah, just brought out, like I said, the worst days sometimes bring out the best in people.
So you get back home now. Is it just you, your mom, and your brother at home? Or your brother? Your
Yes,
brother's at school.
Pat's still at Iona. So I got home on the 12th, right, in the afternoon. All the bridges and tunnels were closed. So we ended up finding a cop friend of ours to get me over to Verrazano, to get me into Brooklyn. And then from there, got a ride from Brooklyn down back home. And yeah, we waited. My brother got a ride from Iona College up in New Rochelle. He got a ride back to home. So we meet my mom, and we were all there, the three of us, and we got there, and but it was crazy. It's just there was no news, right? There's nothing. You're just looking at each other, kind of waiting in anticipation, fielding phone calls. Everyone's reaching out. My dad's family, like I said, is all in Colorado. They're trying to get a hold of us and talk to us, and but eventually people just start showing up, right? Like there was enough food to feed an army. There was, people just started showing up at the house. Kind of, news kind of trickled out that dad was working and no one had heard from him. So we started getting visitors, and just kind of, you didn't know what to do. There was no like, all right, well, we have to do this. Usually when someone dies, right? Like you get to the funeral home, even no matter how tragic, right? You give the body to the funeral home, and you start your grieving process. For us, we started September 12th started like a long period of unknown. We ended up uh, at the end of the day, after it was all said and done, we never found my father, so his body was never recovered. So we were waiting to see if that happened. Like we were waiting for a body so we could have a proper burial. So we didn't end up. There was no body to have a funeral. We ended up just filling a casket on April 20th, 2002, and putting everything that represented him. And we had a full service that down here at the church, and he got the proper send off that he deserved. But it was just from September 12th to April 20th. It was just a lot of unknown, a lot of waiting.
I can't even begin to imagine. Like and I'm sure many people listening can't even begin to imagine what that's like. And we just, on behalf of everybody, just want to say thank you, to you and your family and your father, and his group and everyone out there that day, because they truly exemplified, courage and just humanity's best.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I gotta say, like, if anyone ever needed to see what like dedication, teamwork, you can look at what the FDNY did on September 11th and after. the guys in my father's firehouse, Rescue 4, what they did afterwards was superhuman, right? They After September 11th, there were still fires in New York City. These guys were working in the firehouse. They were digging at the trade center for their friends. They were going to funerals for their other friends. They were, you know, trying to keep their own family lives together. So if yeah, I definitely think if I look back at that time and I see what the guys on the FDNY did that survived, it's still it was incredible. Like it was it's the definition of all those terms that people throw out, right? Heroics and bravery and teamwork. Like what those guys did after that was the real, you know, those guys, they were incredible.
I mean, I can't, having a firsthand view at that, like once you see that, like in particular, someone like you who's lived through it, and then you see the behavior by everybody after it happened, like you've been let in on a world of like just superhuman emotional capacity. And I think once you see that, you know, despite how dark things have gotten, you know, people continue to show up. And like in our lifetime, we haven't seen anything darker. I think that's fair to say. And then you see them continue to show up. There's no way that you can continue living a life where you don't show up for others. Like I we've known each other for a short time, but everything I know about you was probably rooted in what you saw in those couple of days, weeks, months. And you know, of course, it's a transformational event, no doubt about that. Um, However, I think what you just said is even more powerful, and a lot of people don't even probably didn't even think about that, right? Like you don't realize that there were fires on September 12th, and the people who lost loved ones or who lost peers, who lost family, in particular, you know, with the FDNY and the NYPD, they couldn't stop doing their job the next day, and they needed to figure out ways to emotionally take care of their family and loved ones at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, Talk to me a little bit about the role that you played in your own family dynamic. You're the younger brother, right? So then you have your
Yeah.
older brother, and then you have your mother. What was your
So,
role throughout this?
um, well, to be honest, like it's funny on September 12th, right? Baby of the fam on September 10th, baby of the family, right? Uh, so September 12th is, man of the house, right? Pat's at school, dad's not coming home, and thank God, like I was surrounded by like we said, like incredible people. My mother is a rock. She's super strong. She set a tone after September 11th. She said, like I remember, she said, "No, we don't know what's going to happen, but one thing we do know is that no matter what happens, this like you're still held to the same standard that you were here that you were held to if dad was here, right? There was that meant you still had a curfew, you still had to make grades. My mom set that tone right off the bat. Um, and then being surrounded by some of the guys in the firehouse, Liam Flaherty, Billy Murphy, Eddie Zillman, these guys were just like, and I'm leaving out 25 other names that, being surrounded by them, right? They held us to a standard. They were saying, I remember talking to these guys all the time and they're like, listen, make sure you got to take care of the stuff around the house. You got to take care of your mother. You got to, and they were in my ear as like a positive reinforcement about what they thought I should be doing. And it's funny. I said like if I ended up hanging out with a bunch of people who who were making excuses for me and telling me to have a drink or telling me that you know making excuses saying don't worry about your responsibilities right now because life's so upside down. I might have thought that that was right, but I wasn't. I was surrounded by these guys that really had our best interest in mind. They were some of my dad's closest friends, and they were constantly like holding me to the standards that they knew my father would hold us to. So for me, that was just it was invaluable, right? Like it really helped me navigate. 17. Those are those can be
Tough year. Yeah.
yeah. Those are you try to find out
Those
who
are
you are as a dad.
transformational years, right? You're,
Yeah,
you're about to graduate high school, potentially go on to college, figure yourself out. You don't know who you are.
yeah,
You don't really
exactly.
you don't know who you are, you don't know who you're gonna become. Um, Up until that point in life, how did you generally handle adversity, right? Before September 11th, were you even keeled, or were you, someone who maybe had any, did you have any issues or of sorts?
I didn't, never had any issues. I never had adversity before September 11th, right? Like my parents had a phenomenal relationship. I was tight with my brother. We were very family oriented. Like life is, which is kind of crazy to think. Like we literally had a September 10th, no problems in my life. So to deal with September 11th was the first time I really had to experience anything even remotely, well, even pretty much as tragic as it could get. That was the first thing I ever kind of had to navigate.
And to that point, so you must have had a good relationship with your father pre-September 11th. What about your father do you remember the most pre-September 11th? What did you love about your father? And what really kind of stood out to him as that's my dad. Like, describe him a little bit for us.
Yeah, so he was. It's funny. My father was a hard worker. He loved the fire department. He loved his family. He loved being around family. We used to. He had a hardwood floor business too that he owned and ran and worked on. So he worked two full-time jobs, extremely hardworking. And when he was off, it was family time. We if my father had was off that day and Patrick had a basketball game, like the whole family went. I remember coming downstairs, getting ready to go to Pat's basketball game. My father's like, "Go upstairs, go get dressed. Like your father has two jobs." He was very. He's like, "You get dressed, you look proper. After the game, we'll go out for family dinner." And he used to sit there and he used to say, "This is what I worked all week for." And we used to break his chops about it. Like, "Oh, this is what I worked all week for, right?" That, and we used to laugh. And he was just definitely, he worked so hard because he was never given anything in life, and so he went from a boys' home to building his own house. Right? He so his success was our family, and he took pride in everything from the house that we lived in to the way we looked. To the there was no back then it was like whatever style was in it wasn't in our house. The big jeans or the chain wallets or all that stuff from the 90s. Like that's not what we were doing. We were gonna just he was very keen to you know how just everything about family.
I love that. Um, it as the host, it's really hard to transition from 2001. And I know a lot has happened in your life since 2001. I do want to make sure, though, is there anything else that we should know about that year in particular? Going from waking up on your birthday on September 10th to coming home from school on September 11th to the days, weeks, and months until April 20th, 2002, that the audience should be aware of as it pertains to how you were handling this emotionally, about how your family was impacted. Anything else contextually that we got to make sure that we touch on?
I would guess one of the biggest lessons I learned right in that time, because uh, after a couple weeks right of uncertainty. I remember my brother went back to Iona College and he was up there, and everyone's you're a freshman in college. That's people are gonna they're exploring, they're living their lives. And my brother was like, I'm not in the right mindset. Like all these people are partying and we don't know where dad is. And I remember saying like, well, what do you think? Like what do you think? And he's like, I kind of want to start going down to the trade center and looking for myself. And I said, all right, like if that's what you want to do, like I'll meet you. And we ended up linking up with the guys from Rescue Four, and we got to start going down to the trade center and spending time down there with those guys while they were digging. They were letting us go right there with them, which was an incredible experience, and it really it it taught me like a ton of lessons in life. But one of the I guess the best lesson you can learn is right. You're always taught from a young age that just you work really hard and it'll work out and all this stuff. And that was a tough pill to swallow when we were down there digging and we were looking for him, and the guys in the firehouse were looking for him, and it was really hard to realize that you know just they put in the time. Everyone put in the time. Everyone did as much as they could, but at the end of the day, we never found him. And that was just definitely a life lesson of life's not fair and things don't always work out. So that was one thing I took away from in those months afterwards, from September to April, that that life's not fair, and you just kind of you got to keep moving forward and handle what you're dealt.
Can you just take us to that landscape, just again painting a picture for the audience here, because we saw it on TV. We saw people digging, we saw people rummaging through all the dust, trying to find loved ones, trying to find signs of life. What was the environment like down there? Was anyone discovered at all while you were there, or was everyone kind of similar to you know just doing their best to find a sign of life and really lifting each other up, in the meantime?
Yeah, I mean, well, while I was there, particularly, it was a couple weeks after the
Okay,
initial attack, so
got it.
there was no active
Got it. No
like
sign of life.
rescue.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
got
but
it.
they were recovering bodies while we were there, and that was just one of those. It was one of those things. Like I just felt like the people we were with uh, were just the top. They're still the best guys in the world, and they were that was just a fact of life, man. We that's what happened. That's where my father was, and we were there. And there were some people I remember saying like, oh, what are these kids doing here? And then it didn't really matter what other people said, because we knew that that's where we wanted to be, that's where we should be. And looking back on it, thank God we were given that opportunity. I learned a ton about myself, a ton about what men do in hard times, right? Uh, from being down there. So it was definitely, it was a chaotic scene, as you would expect, but it was kind of organized chaos. There was iron workers cutting steel beams, the size of tree trunks. There was the police, the military, right? All these people were down there, and the FDNY showed up like you couldn't believe, right? Thousands of guys every day volunteering. So, like I said before, that the teamwork aspect, the humanity aspect of what those guys were doing back then was second to none.
Hey all, it's me, Bishoy. As a marathon runner and endurance athlete, I've come to understand the importance of properly fueling your body for preparation and recovery. Every day, you get a shot at success. How you start your day typically paints a picture of what the rest of the day will look like. Start your day with a super convenient, healthy, and delicious nutritional win. Meal 1 by Creatures of Habit. Overnight oatmeal packed with 30 grams of plant-based protein, chia, flax, and pumpkin seeds. Vitamin D3, omega-3s, a probiotic, and digestive enzymes made in under 1 minute. Stop wasting time or worrying about what to eat as your first meal of the day. Start with Meal 1. Visit creaturesofhabit.com, creatures spelled with a K, and use code MILE40 for 15% off a one-time purchase or the first subscription order payment. Unreal. And like you said earlier, right, like the worst tragedy that we've lived through just brought out the best in humanity, and I know that will never leave you. Do you hold on to anything, whether it's his badge or just anything maybe that you came across that day, like a physical reminder of your father? Is there anything in particular that is really near and dear to you that you held on to?
Yeah. So when, although we did not find his body, my father was holding, it's an officer's tool. It's called a Halligan, and it was his, right. It's a shorter tool. It's engraved KDR4, right. So we know it's the Officer of Rescue 4, Captain Dowdell. So that was found in kind of October, November, and it made its way back to our family. So it's sitting at my mother's house still. It's his office's tool. So that, my mom always said that that was what we got, that early enough, and then that was it. That's all we got. So, but it's nice because I have my oldest son is named Kevin after my father. My kids know about it. My kids have seen it. Yeah, and it's just like I said, it's nice to that they could see and hold something that he was using that day.
Since 2001, can you think of a time or an instance in your life, whether it was something that you had gone through or even a positive memory where you just kind of look around and you're like, dad was there. Dad knows what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million of those. I mean, listen, everything from high school graduation to getting on the fire department to having three kids, like you kind of feel like he was present and all that stuff. Everything is turned into like kind of bittersweet, right? But you find your new normal after a while, right? After a lot of hard decisions and after a lot of kind of just letting time heal, you find your new normal, and that's where we're at now. And our new normal is great. Our new normal is we keep my father, like right in our peripheral vision, right? He's always right there with us, but we're still looking forward. And that's how I like to think of it. Like he's always right. He's right here next to us. But we're still going in the forward direction, just like he would want.
To that point, your mantra, stay the course. Tell us where that was derived from. It came up twice, maybe three times in your bio.
Yeah.
Walk me through that a little bit.
So that really came from when people were describing, like, I didn't really get into it. My brother. So after September 11th, Pat previously had applied to West Point. He got waitlisted, so he ended up going to Iona College. So after September 11th, Pat reapplies to West Point and gets in. Right, he gets in. He's the first class after September 11th to go into the United States Military Academy, kind of knowing that he's going to war. Right, he's the world's in conflict now, and so Pat's decision to kind of stay on that track and stay and reapply, and knowing what he was getting himself into was we're extremely proud of. He ended up doing the tour in Iraq, tour in Afghanistan, bronze starred, like just he took the fight over there, right? He went to he did what he wanted to do, and that was something that he wanted to do before September 11th. And I think that nobody would have faulted him for not reapplying, right? After seeing the tragedy, after seeing what the world unfolded, but that's just not who he is. That's not who our family is. And Pat jumped. He reapplied, got in, and then went to West Point, and then did his deployments. And then my stay the course was I always wanted to be a fireman, and my father thought it was a great idea. He was thrilled to think that I might follow in his footsteps. And same thing. I took that test when I was 17 and a half. I was still in high school when I took the fire exam, and I guess nobody would have faulted me if I knew a couple other kids who lost fathers who were like, why would you want to do it? And I still I couldn't think of a better reason why I wanted to do it. My father died for this, for the uniform. And I thought, like, what better way to honor him than to put it on yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I what you I'm at a loss of words, man, because for many reasons. But I just think there's just something so special about a son carrying on the legacy of their father, especially when their father's mission was rooted in so much good for the community around them. And it's not just, the fact that was part of a community that went out and took care of others, on a daily basis. It's what you said, and what really kind of stuck with me was that September 12th mindset. That was your father's community. That father's community was to keep showing up no matter what the circumstances, and to be the light in the midst of darkness. Um, and
Yeah,
that's the responsibility. Yep.
there was a Navy SEAL, I think. I don't know who actually said it, but I love the quote. It says, I never want to see another September 11th, but I would love to see another September 12th, right? Like, just life in general. People, flags, people were the best of humanity came out. And sometimes I wish you'd see that again, without the tragedy.
Yeah, and that's the responsibility that you're upholding, and that's the example that you're setting for your family now, right? Like for your kids.
Yeah.
And um man, like I just can't imagine, even like, you had the best dad in the world in your head. And now you're being a father to your children. And I'm sure they look at you as being the best dad in the world. But
I hope so.
you know in your head that, and this is what we all think, right? Like I'm a father now, and I'd like to think I'm a good father for my daughter. But I know that I'm not as good as my father is for me. Like, and so like that's the thing, is like there's this constant cycle of like you want to be the best that you can be, and your father is the example for you. And it gives you something to continually strive for, right? You're always striving to be the best that you can be. And I think that's the best thing that your father left you with, in the wake of just, a lot of darkness, and the unfortunate circumstances that had all happened. So, now that we've spoke about that a little bit, let's talk a little bit more about the work that you've been doing recently, how you started sharing your story publicly, why you felt it was important to do so, and ultimately, what your vision is for growing this platform. So let's just talk about, where did things get started in terms of you sharing this story publicly?
Uh, it's funny. It got started by a friend from actually Australia who had said, I have some friends doing a conference in Nashville, and they're looking for someone to speak. And I said, um, nobody comes to mind. And he said, I think you should look into it. And at the time, uh, never really doing anything like that before. I said, yeah, I'll look into it. And I ended up sitting down with my brother, saying like, I don't even know what to say. And then we started talking. It was great because we ended up reminiscing about a lot of stuff that we really hadn't talked about over over the years, right? You just kind of keep moving forward. And so it made me and my brother Pat help me sit down and write some stuff down. And having it brought back some great stories that we could sit there and kind of talk about, which was an incredible experience. And then really just once I got the story in my head, like the way I wanted it to portrayed. I remember talking to the first group, and it like you said before, it hits home with a lot of people because of our age, right? Like, where a lot of people in their you know 40s, 50s, 60s, they're either young professionals or just starting out, and those people are now 23 years later moving up the chain, and so it was relatable. And one of the other things I loved about it is as we said, time passes, and but I think keeping their memory alive, like that's their only way to so they don't die in vain, right? Is and in today's crazy world we're living in, I think talking about like what the fire department did, like we said before, after September 11th, is a great story, and I think it should be heard because these guys did it. Like, there's no, it's just a simple truth. That's kind of how I look at this, what we're talking about, and whether it's our family's truth or the fire department's truth. Like, I just think as 9/11 kind of keeps going in the rearview mirror, as time keeps moving on, um, I think it's important to kind of remember 9/11 is almost like a phrase, right? Like, it was there September 11th, or it was, uh, you know, that's their ground zero. Like it's almost more of a catchphrase than it is an incident. So I just like to try to bring awareness to like the decisions that were made that day and how it affected everyone afterwards. And yeah, so it's been an incredible experience. Get to meet some really amazing people and kind of share with them, my father's story and our family. So it's been a blessing.
Thank you. I mean, it takes a lot of bravery to do what you're doing because you're constantly having to relive one of the darker moments of your life. And it says a lot about you with regards to how you can take that moment, and not only reflect on it, but use it to lay the foundation and groundwork for individuals. Like there's a whole generation now who was born after 9/11.
Yeah,
And, you know, similar to us, they couldn't imagine, anything like that. And I'm going to take a venture out there and say that for them, 2020 was the closest thing to something they never expected in their lifetime. And then it happened, but it's not the same. It's not the
yeah,
same. It's not the same at all. And um, what 9/11 showed you was that in an instant, your life can change forever. And I'm just extremely proud to have you on here, man. I this entire session inside, I just feel a sense of pride.
I
I feel a
appreciate
sense of
that.
pride for um, just you using this platform to shine a light on um, an event that impacted us all tremendously, but that very few of us were able to live through in a way that was so deeply personal as it was to you and your family. And so, with that being said, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for continuing to carry your father's torch, for carrying his legacy. Thank you for your service, for your brother's service, and thank you for your family, for just showing us how to navigate the unexpected with, as much grace despite the grief. So, my deepest gratitude, my friend.
I appreciate that, and thanks for having me on. It's great. I appreciate anyone allowing me the opportunity to talk about my father. It's definitely, um, I really, it's incredible to share with you. And yeah, I just want to say thanks for allowing me to be on, and thanks for remembering with me.
Of course, brother.